This is Councilmember Jennifer Adams, and I'm calling this meeting to order for the Sustainable and Livable Communities Committee on June 23rd, 2021. Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. Before we begin this meeting, I'd like to acknowledge the city of Tempe is in the Salt River Valley, which is the ancestral home of the O'Thum, Pima, and Peeposh Maricopa Indian communities, whose care and keeping of this land allow us to be here today. And now let's officially call the June meeting of the Sustainable and Livable Communities Committee to order. As you might expect, our committee covers topics related to sustainable and livable communities. Note that no formal votes or decisions about city programs, policies, or budgets will happen here. Our role is just to explore various topics with staff and stakeholders in the community and to make recommendations to our council colleagues. We want this process to be transparent, inclusive, and easy for you to be part of whenever you choose to be. And you can share your thoughts with us by filling out a comment card about any item on the meeting agenda or by reaching out to us directly with any thoughts, questions, or ideas. Someday when we host meetings in person again, and I expect that will be in August, yay, can't wait for that. It'll be easier for people to speak in meetings. But for now, in this virtual environment, we need you to fill out a comment card in advance that can be read into the record for any agendized item. The link to the comment cards can be found on our committee webpage at www.tempe.gov/s/L. That's www.tempe.gov/SLC. And you'll find contact information for committee members and staff there for non-agendized items and questions as well. Councilmember Cubie, are you out there?
She is still attempting to come in currently. One sec. We can always proceed forward, and then we can come back to item number 2 for the minutes.
Okay, let's do that. Okay, public comments. The next item on our agenda is item 3, public comments. This committee welcomes public comment. According to the Arizona open meeting law, the committee may only discuss matters listed on the agenda. Matters brought up by the public under public comment that are not listed on the agenda cannot be discussed by the committee. A 3-minute limit per person is in effect. Kristen, do we have any comment cards for this meeting?
Councilmember Adams, we have not had any comment cards submitted for this month's meeting.
Okay, thank you. The next item on our agenda is item 4A, current items and updates. And we have one item in progress to discuss today, item 4A1, the Cool Kids update. And I think that Dr. Braden Kay is here to talk about that. Braden?
Thank you so much, Councilmember Adams. So as you'll remember, one of the key areas that we're focusing on in the Office of Sustainability with our climate action plan is resilience to extreme heat. And over the last several years, we've gotten feedback from our Sustainability Commission and our residents that we needed to have more youth programming and that we needed to further explore the intersection between resilience to extreme heat and racial equity. And so with that in mind, we partnered with partners at ASU, as well as taking advantage of city programs that are already either very effective or are up and coming and exciting. So we developed this Cool Kids grant with our arts engagement team, with the human services education team that runs MIAC, the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council, to create 2 climate-oriented councils to help support creating more resilience to extreme heat, not just in neighborhoods in Tempe, but also to help advance the dialogue around resilience to extreme heat nationally. Also part of the project is folding in the work of our urban forester, Richard Atkins, and our new emergency manager, Michelle Seitz, with this idea that if we're going to really be resilient to extreme heat, we needed a coordinated effort between many of our departments and then some of our key city staff, such as our urban forester and emergency manager. So we have an exciting update video to show that describes the project and the key components of the project, and then I'm here to answer any questions. So Alex, feel free to play the video. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Braden Kay, Sustainability Director for the City of Tempe. We're here to talk to you about an exciting opportunity that we have called Cool Kids, Cool Places, Cool Futures, where Tempe youth can catalyze climate action in our region. How do people in your life talk about heat in Arizona? In Tempe, when adults hear how hot it might be in the coming decades, many of them say, well, I'll be dead by then. Or they say, well, we'll move if it gets that hot. Young people in Tempe tell us they want to stay here, and they know they need to make it cooler in order to live healthy and productive lives. The Phoenix region could face upwards of 40 to 50 days over 120 degrees. If young people want a vibrant economy and healthy lifestyles, then young people need adults to change their behavior now. Research from ASU shows there's a potential to invest in urban forestry, green buildings, cool materials, and low carbon transportation. We might be able to limit the extreme heat average increase to 2 to 5 degrees instead of the increase that may come of 6 to 12 degrees if we continue business as usual. This shows that our efforts to cool our region can have a lasting impact on our economy and health. Heat does not have equal impact across our cities. Shade is often in wealthier neighborhoods, and Tempeans with less resources often have less shade and less access to air conditioning. This makes extreme heat a social justice issue. Data shows that Black and Indigenous residents of Maricopa County are more likely to die from heat. And research shows that Latino-Latin neighborhoods face a heavier heat burden, making heat a racial justice issue. Cool Kids has partners on board to ensure we center people of color and Indigenous concepts of resilience as we address extreme heat. This project is meant to shift power and give voice to the next generation of leaders that are demanding we build our city in ways that center youth, racial equity, and Indigenous perspectives in order to ensure that we're tackling injustices in our current built environment and creating a more cool and inclusive Tempe. We're going to give you a brief overview of Cool Kids, which is a 2-year project meant to support young people in Tempe to combat extreme heat.
Hi, my name is Nicole, and I am the Community Resilience Coordinator with the Cool Kids Project. Cool Kids is based on 2 youth councils with 10 students each to focus on urban cooling and climate action in the Escalante Victory Acres neighborhood and the Gillian neighborhood. Tempe's Mayor Youth Advisory Council has a long history of including young people in city decisions and making change happen, and Cool Kids is building off of this important legacy. Cool Kids is designed with resources to support youth councils in how they decide to drive this project. ASU researchers and student fellows with experience in racial equity, Indigenous concepts of resilience, planning, design, and sustainability will be available to support the councils in the projects they choose to design. City staff, including community development, transportation, community and human services, will support the council's work to be heard and implement it, including Tempe's new urban forester and emergency manager. Councils will also be supported by artists, local youth advocates, and social workers. Cool Kids will strive towards cooler neighborhoods, a better city, And they're going to make an impact to see that extreme heat is being understood as a social justice issue in Maricopa County. Projects will include communications and art projects, cooling projects like food forests and native gardens, and guidelines for the city on how to invest in urban cooling in equitable ways.
Cool Kids aims to create local solutions, and we are inspired by global ideas. Karina Kwame uses art and jazz to tackle climate change. And Dan Neely's team is building community resilience from the ground up in Wellington, New Zealand. Dan and Karina will be available to support the Cool Kids to ensure that we are centering creativity, equity, and community voices in our work. Cool Kids wants to shift from top-down emergency response to grassroots and people-centered community resilience. This means shifting from responses like solely investing in education and water bottles to regional collective action, including community projects and urban forestry. Tempe needs young people to become cool kids. Please encourage an 8th through 11th grader in Tempe that you know to join the movement. Adults can help by volunteering time and resources to help make the Cool Kids effort a success. Please visit tempe.gov/coolkids to get involved.
Thank you so much for watching that, and I'm available for any questions.
Are there any questions for Dr. K?
Sure, I have a question.
Okay, go for it.
Being late, I'm in a rural area and had a storm here and we crashed the internet, so it was a scramble to get back on, so thanks. Great, and so the main source of funding from Cool Kids is the Robert J. Wood Foundation, is that right?
The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation has committed, about $600,000 for this grant. And then we're also been able to leverage grants from SRP, MIC, the Indian Gaming grants, to help with some of the tree plantings that we're going to be doing. We actually were in touch. We're working and have been doing tours with both Tempe Union High School as well as Tempe Elementary to find to work on pilot projects, places where Richard is going to be able to work with the Cool Kids and installing installing forests and work like that. So, and we have a few other grants that are going to be able to help support the work, but the main source of funding is about $600,000 over 2.5 years from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation.
Robert Wood Johnson. Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but do you think this program could have happened without equity in action first? I mean, was that a building block to lead to this program as well? I mean, it's all sort of interconnected. You think about bringing of people who aren't typically at the table and making them the table with equity in action. Do you think there's a connection there?
Oh, 100%. So, one of the things that was so exciting about Equity in Action as an innovation grant, it was part of the Innovation Hub proposal group of projects, is Equity in Action is a partnership between the Office of Sustainability, the Office of Strategic Management and Diversity, and Neighborhood Services. And really, by doing that deep work of working on how to center new voices and different voices in our work as a city, that work was critical to basically demonstrate to Robert Wood Johnson Foundation that Tempe is already doing work at the intersection of sustainability and racial equity, and that their investment would be building on several years of work we've done in this space. This grant is also building on grants that we've received from Maricopa County and ASU, and a grant that we received from the National Science Foundation to work on extreme heat. So now that our office has been up and running for almost 5 years, we're able to apply for grants that build on previous grants and previous investments that the city has made. And now we're already seeing that pay off. We haven't publicly announced it yet, but we're going to be ASU is going to be receiving $100,000 from the National Endowment for the Arts to work on incorporating Indigenous perspectives into city plans and city placemaking. So, and that's very much attached to the Cool Kids work. So it's really exciting to see how these grants build off of each other and how investments that the city has made, whether it be in our energy equity work or in equity in action, can really help us attract bigger national foundation grants. Just to make it clear, you know, we're only one of 6 cities that received this grant, including Detroit, Cleveland, Jackson, Mississippi, and Seattle, Washington, and Lowell, Massachusetts. So it's a very, very competitive grant, and it really is a huge win for our community and gives us resources to really advance our work. Our Sustainability Commission has been really begging us to spend more resources and have more time to do youth-based climate action. And I'm so excited to have this opportunity to be able to have the resources to do deep work with Tempe students.
And Braden, a testimony to you and to the Sustainability Commission, I think over 5 years ago, and we didn't have an Office of Sustainability, and Ani Shakurjian had done so much work to sort of build the foundation, but we had to convince council to do it as a pilot program, and I think your position has paid for itself many, many times over, and I think you brought in more than $2.4 million in grants, so I really want to thank you for all that. And I'm really proud to be a part of this program. I would love to see a story written about this, or K-Jazz interview, or it just seems like there's a lot of opportunities here to tell other cities, to tell our story to other cities, and also let the people of Tempe and young people of Tempe know what we're doing. So I imagine that's already in the planning to get more attention to the programming.
Absolutely, we really wanted to have at least one of the youth councils up and running so that they can do a lot of the communications work themselves, so it can truly be youth-centered. I also want to mention we're continuing to do recruitment for the youth councils. So over the course of the summer, we'll be doing additional outreach and social media posts. So people's support with getting the word out about the program and about the ability for 8th through 11th graders to be involved. Really looking forward to that. And yeah, it's a great suggestion. We'll continue to have more of a media strategy so more people know about the grant and the work.
Thanks so much, Dr. K. And back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Kuby. I just think this is a really impressive program. I love it. I agree with my council mate that we should get some press involved in this. I mean, the fact that we beat out all of those other cities, just think how many cities we beat out to get this program established in our wonderful community. And I'm hats off to you, Dr. K, on this, and the whole Sustainability Commission. And also, it really speaks to me about other pilots programs that could become reality in the near future, hopefully, that will pay for themselves also. So I just think that this is a great example of starting a pilot program and then having all these grants come in, and it kind of feeds off itself and becomes sustainable in its own right. So it's very impressive, and I sure think that we should use this, Councilmember Kuby, for future pilot programs as a great example. And I'm sure you would agree.
Oh yes, I can think of a few programs.
Me too. With that, okay, we're going to go back, Councilmember Kuby, to let's see. Let me just look for a second. Okay, so you're going to go back to the beginning, early on, where it says thank you, Councilmember Kuby. It's your first green area on the.
Yes. I'd like to make a motion to approve our minutes from our May meeting. Do you have any changes to make, Chair?
No, none for me. Do you?
No, I do not. So without objection, well, I move to approve. So if you second.
I second.
All righty.
Excellent. Good. Okay. Okay, now we're going to go back okay, so now we're going to go back to move to item 4B, new items for consideration. And we'll begin with 4B1, the ASU Circular Economy Pilot Project with Charlie Rolski with ASU. Charlie, whenever you're ready.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. It is great to be speaking with you. Thanks so much for taking the time to reach out. All right. So do I have control over the slides?
We're
I
glad
do.
to have you, Charlie, or Charles.
So do I can control the slides from here, or do you all control the slides?
I have control of the slides, Charles.
Okay. Okay, sweet. And just go ahead and get started now.
Yes, go right ahead.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. I work with Tim Long at ASU. He is a polymer chemist and wonderful engineer, and I'm carving out my niche currently. The recent pandemic has kind of inspired me to take a different direction. And as you can see on the screen here, if healthcare were a country, it would be the 5th largest emitter of greenhouse gases on the planet. You can go forward. And in 2014, 5.5 million tons of plastic waste was generated in research labs worldwide. Now, these two industries are crucial for maintaining healthy communities around the world and a healthy planet, but they also end up, participating quite a bit of plastic material. And much of the time, this plastic has been in, on, or around biological material, which makes it incredibly difficult to recycle. So best case scenario, it'll end up, sequestered in a landfill. Worst case scenario, it gets incinerated. Only 15% of this is actually hazardous, meaning it's touched something biological. And incineration, as you can imagine, is extremely unsustainable and terrible for the planet. Next slide. We created a method to recycle medical and laboratory plastics, which are normally incinerated or sent to a landfill. And this is approved by ADEQ. And we also just first established the first ever campus-based recycling microfactory that specifically focused on materials from medical facilities or laboratories. So you can imagine there's quite a bit of that that's generated, and that's the goal and the mission of the microfactory. Now, one of the things that we like to do, you can keep scrolling, we got through a lot of words here. One of the things we like to do in this facility is to take a different look at what items that we use every day. So if you think of something like a mattress in your house, every 5 to 7 years, we're going through one, throwing it away. It's a lot of material. And the material itself is kind of an antiquated chemistry. So what we do is we look at things with a different approach. We reimagine them, we rethink them, we consider them, we break them down to a really small form and rebuild them using green chemistry. And this is kind of the same thing we're now doing with these medical and laboratory plastics as well. I dislike ASU so much that I got my bachelor's, my master's, and my PhD all from there. So I'm a Sun Devil for the long haul. My PhD was actually on plastic pollution. I joined Dr. Long's lab mid-January, and we just started this project actually pretty much in April of this year. So we've gotten a lot of momentum in a very quick amount of time. My role is heavy with sustainability and research, and I do a lot of public outreach. So there's myself, talking to legislators dressed as a shark because I take that very seriously. And then I also worked with the Girl Scouts of Arizona on a bill that they put forward, I'm sure you're probably familiar with, to try to fine people for releasing balloons. That was thrown out the first time, and I worked with them to try to have that outcome changed. We're getting our plastics from 2 different places right now. So I'm working with Dr. LeBaire, who's a wonderful human being, with his revolutionary COVID-19 testing program that he implemented at Biodesign. It's an incredible program, but it generates quite a bit of plastic waste. And currently I'm collecting about 15 pounds of clean plastic waste from that lab. There's many others that want to get involved with this because if you can imagine, if they send their plastics to me, they save money. Externally, Mayo Clinic got word of this, and we've been working with them. They've been a wonderful collaborator. They just started a collection site up at the Scottsdale office, and I've been going up there collecting plastics from them. So it's been a really cool external-internal collaboration, and I'm trying to limit it for now because if I take too much on, I'm going to drown in all of this plastic material. So excited to be working with both groups. This is kind of the breakdown of what we're looking at. I actually have a scope here. This is a ureteroscope. It's a single-use scope that's used during surgeries. If you have some issues with your kidneys, this is just the packaging itself that it comes in. It's a lot of material. So what we do is we grind it up and we extrude it, and it turns into filament. And if you click on that video, it should play, so you can kind of get an idea. That's the hopper that I put the grounded up plastics into. And then I don't know why it's shaky. The orange bit heats it up, turns it into filament. The filament's cooled, it's spooled, and that's exactly what's actually loaded into 3D printers. So we can take this material and 3D print new items from it. We can also sell the filament because it's extremely high quality. And our lab has the capabilities to be able to test it and ensure that if it's not of high quality, we can make modifications to make it so. So 3D printing has really taken off just because it's gotten a lot more inexpensive, and there's been a really high demand for filament. So that's one of the goals for this factory. Here's kind of a layout. So Biodesign actually allocated some space for our little micro factory. And if you click forward just one more, you'll see 2 check marks. This is what we purchased so far. We purchased a granulator, which saves me a lot of time because normally I cut the plastics up and then I put them in the Ninja margarita maker thing. And I've gotten a lot of cuts on my hands from that. So that's going to save a lot of time. And then the filament extruder I applied through the school sustainability for a grant that was approved. So I was able to purchase the filament extruder. We have our eyes on a 3D printer. We also have a couple other instruments that help to verify the quality of the material and make sure it can hold up to high heat. But this is what the micro factory is looking like currently and hopefully in the future. And then one more ahead, you'll see a really cool instrument we're trying to get. This is actually a filament braider. So we can turn it, this plastic into really cool other items that I'll discuss later. But we're hoping to populate this space. It's gonna be very public. We want a lot of people to come in there. We're gonna do a lot of outreach there so that, we can 3D print some really cool things, give them to kids. They can play with it for a year, bring it back to me, and then I'll grind it up again and keep the process going as long as we can, truly recycling the material. Right now, we can produce about 120 quality spools a week, so it's worth around $2,500 or about $100,000 annually. Keep in mind, this is with a reduced volume just because we're only upgrading, incrementally. We're finalizing an LLC right now. It's affiliated with ASU so that we can sell the filament at a discounted cost. It would go to 4 different places. So a quarter of it would go to medical testing since we're getting a lot of our items from the testing services. It'll fund sustainability officers whose job it is to kind of feel out in labs what items might be best suited for our recycling efforts. A quarter of it would fund graduate and undergrads that are working to help us. And then 25% would go to nonprofits that work in the community, maybe providing healthcare to at-risk communities, something along those lines. We want to definitely be involved with the public and the community. So far, as I said, we've received the Sustainability Initiatives Revolving Fund Grant, which was amazing because that funded our filament extruder. We have the space secured. We're applying for funding to just expand the volume. Right now, I'm doing everything myself, so it's a little chaotic. I'm having some undergrads help. I'm training them as we speak, but I'd really like to get them paid eventually. We're finalizing the ASU LLC. And the other cool thing that we're starting to do is we're taking apart these medical instruments, which are usually only used one time. And we're kind of dissecting the inner workings of it so that we can potentially 3D print the parts for the instrument themselves, because there's a lot of male physicians that are concerned about, the kind of single-use ramifications of these items, and they're trying to figure out if they can improve the sustainability. So that's one avenue that we can go down that we're actually very excited about. A lot of collaborators, a lot of people we've spoken with, and a lot of people that we wish to speak with. There's the ASU Starbucks collaboration is a big one for us. Obviously, we want to work with Phoenix, City of Tempe. We're continuing to work with the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, which is really exciting because they just approved us to take dirty plastics now. So even if it has interacted with something biological, we can create a method to now take them in and recycle them just the same. So that's, there's really not going to be any constraint on what we can take now. In the future, we want to build a house on campus that is 100% made out of this medical and laboratory waste that we're collecting. And we're very close to this being something tangible. So as we scale up, we get closer and closer to doing something like this. We want it to be a completely sustainable house where people can get inspired, especially because this idea started off really small and it's able to grow. And I think that's a really great energy for future sustainability students to be around. So very excited to be working on this, to be speaking with you. And I would love to take any questions if you have them.
Madam Chair, may I speak?
So you may, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Charlie, it's really good to see you.
Good to see you too, Councilwoman.
go way back in the
Yes.
days of the plastic bag ban and all. And it's amazing how serendipitous this all is, because as you might have seen a few weeks ago, Habitat for Humanity had its launch of a 3D printed home in concrete that's being built right near Clark Park. And it's Habitat, it's for the first, I think, a 3D printed home in the US, and Habitat Humanity chose Tempe for its location. So we're really proud about that. So coincidentally, like a few weeks before that, I was talking to Gabriel Jaramillo from Central Arizona Habitat for Humanity. He said, there's a guy, I've heard about this guy, or I met him, or one of his students, and he's working on producing polymers from single-use plastic and wants to extract it through a 3D printer and eventually build houses. And I want to get in touch. And so since then, there's been a meeting with Professor Long and Gabriel, and you probably know about that. And there's going to be some future meetings with the city of Tempe, because we would like very much, I hope, Councilmember Adams, we'd all very much like to be part of the first 3D printed plastic home. Hopefully it wouldn't melt in the sun. But you know, even with a 3D printing of concrete prices have gone up, not like prices for wood have gone up, but the prices have gone up considerably. And there just seems to be enormous trash to cash potential here with 3D printing of plastic polymers. So I'm so excited about it. When I first heard about it, I just almost couldn't sleep that night. I was thinking about all the potential. I have a couple questions though. One is plastic waste. I mean, it makes a really great story, and there's so much plastic waste that comes from the medical world, but what about just plastic bottles? Is there more, or does it take a special kind of plastic? Like, why not work with plastic bottles as well?
Yeah, so it's a great question. We are technically working with bottles that do come from the medical industry, but we're kind of separating this out because there are other efforts on campus to, for example, go through the MU trash and separate all that stuff out as well. So they're working on the plastics that are a little bit easier to access, kind of in the same way that we are, and we're working on plastics that are actually really difficult to access. So we can only get special approval for these items, and we want to keep the waste stream specific to these items, just because I don't want anything foreign to maybe go in there and contaminate it with food waste instead of it just being something that's medical. So there's a lot of potential to do that, but we're sticking just for now with medical and lab plastic.
But in the future, we could expand that model for other types of plastic and other types of sources, I imagine.
Easily. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And right now I have 6 massive bags full of just plastics from these groups. So once we increase the volume and I can take more, I'll just, whatever we can take, we'll take.
So have you been in touch with our mutual friend, Deanna Cohen from the Plastic Pollution Coalition? Are they aware of your work?
I'm pretty sure I've kept this pretty low key just because there's a couple of shortcomings when it comes to sustainability initiatives. One, it's not marketable, and 2, it's just not going to work. It works in theory and not in reality. So what I have to do is I have to prove to these people that would normally purchase pristine filament that this is as good as that filament is. Otherwise, I don't have a story. So I've kept this kind of on the down low until I can prove the quality of the material. And then once I can prove the quality of the material, which we have, and I can 3D print something which is structurally intact, then I can kind of open the doors and say, all right, we made it work.
So is filament the same, or how does filament differ from plastic pellets that we hear about?
Yeah, they're kind of one and the same. So we actually take the pellets and we grind them up. I used to have a bag here. We grind them up and we take larger items, grind them up and turn them into something else. Plastic pellets or nurdles can be used to basically make, print or mold new plastic items. We're turning them into pellets so that they can go in that granulator that I showed, which is then an auger moves it into the heating element of the instrument and then pushes out the filament. So the filament's kind of the precursor to 3D printing something. It attaches to the side of the instrument and then layer upon layer, as you've probably seen, is distributed. So it's just the easiest way to 3D print something in this manner.
And then I'd want to ask, so in an ideal world, what would the next step be for the city of Tempe to become involved in the work of you and your lab?
Absolutely. I really, it's kind of the resources that are available. We're going to need a good, strong network to be able to handle all this, just because there are a lot of local hospitals and doctors' offices that have a vested interest in sustainability. I mean, right now I can tell you the bottleneck is time working on it. It's really difficult to do everything all at the same time, and then scaling up. So the volume that I can handle right now is relatively low just because we've gone from a hobbyist setup to now kind of an intermediate setup. And as we expand, I mean, maybe resources like funding opportunities that I could apply for. I don't know as much what the city has available. But yeah, certainly the connections, having people volunteer to help us, or, even like transporting it, that would be really helpful. And then applying for more funding, if you have any access to any resources I could apply for, would be wonderful.
Mhm. And Braden, do you have any ideas about possible collaborations in the future?
Yeah, I think that this is a really exciting work, and I think making sure that we're connected to all of the solid waste departments in the valley. So as you think about what scaling up looks like over time, that we are connecting you to cities throughout the valley. I think that that's one critical piece, and then happy to help you think about how we bring more medical providers together in terms of growing the sources, and happy also to sit down with you to think about what types of funding might be available. Have you been in touch with anyone from the EPA yet, or not yet?
No, I haven't been in touch with anyone from the EPA specifically yet. No.
Yeah, I think at a
idea.
certain point, sitting down with the EPA Region 9, they might be very interested in this idea as well.
Okay, that's a really good idea. Thank you. Yeah, it kind of took off really quickly, and so it's been trying to catch up on everything, and yeah. Anyways, that's really helpful. Thank you.
That's a good problem to have.
Yeah, drowning in plastic.
Charlie, I have a really good contact with the EPA who's involved with the Reimagine project, but he's somebody I can reach out to pretty quickly if you want to get through their bureaucracy.
Oh, sure.
But I'm really jazzed about this. I just think there's so much potential. But I do want to ask, should it be turned into a home building, a polymer that becomes home building material? How does it interact with 118-degree heat? It wouldn't just be plastic, right? There'd be other materials in that polymer than plastic, I imagine.
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the advantages of using these instruments is that there's such a strong heating element. You're able to add things into it and to give it more structure. You can be very selective about what you're 3D printing. So you're not necessarily making the entire house out of plastic or out of these items. What you could do is make maybe the foundation or certain structures in the wood in the walls, fill that up with foam, put stucco on the outside, and you've just got one component that's still remediated by these other more cooling components. So it doesn't have to be the entire house, but it can be 30 or 40% of what it might have been before. So not so much that it's going to cause everyone to die of heat stroke.
And I know monopolizing the time, Councilmember Adams, I have just one more question.
That's okay.
Sustainability students came up with a construction block that was made of, I think, styrofoam and other materials. And isn't there a very large fee? Braden, you may know this, like a couple $100,000, maybe even more, to get it tested and qualified as a material that can be used in housing? Like beyond patents, beyond all that, but just that is charged by some national group in order to qualify as a material that's approved materials.
Yeah, I actually don't know as much about that. I know there is a company that's actually right by where your picture is there that I think it's called Good Building Materials or something similar, but they recycle styrofoam into these building blocks.
Yeah, they'd be good resource for you, I think.
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
really excited. Anything we can do to help extend this, and the best ideas come from students, postdocs, and faculty from Arizona State University. If we can't benefit from that, then what are we doing here? So thanks so much. We'll be in touch.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. It's great speaking with you all.
Thanks, Dr. Ralsky. I'm really impressed with the house in particular because it has ASU all over it, signs on it. I wanted to point that out. But no, this is an incredible presentation. Really, so much potential, and I think that Dr. K can help you a lot with getting funding and things. So, and I like the EPA suggestions, and whatever we can do, we want to partner with you and help in any way we can. So I'm very excited. This is amazing, and the potential is huge, and you're making it happen. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your kind words. And yeah, I'm just trying to make ASU proud. Such a
That's
great
right.
school.
It is. All right. Speaking of ASU, our next presentation is on mosquitoes. Okay, so moving on to, oh yes, I'm sorry. So the next item is 4B2, mosquito suppression. I'm really excited about this one, and I will now turn it over to Dr. John Harrison at ASU. Dr. Harrison, go ahead and tell us everything we need to know about mosquitoes in Tempe and what to do about it.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for inviting me to this committee meeting. Oh, look, I had a spelling error in my title. So this is the overall message: sustainable control of annoying ankle biters. The mosquito Aedes aegypti is possible. And I've been teaching at ASU for 30 years now, and just had a student who finished a PhD thesis working on this mosquito. And I know you all know them because they are these incredibly annoying ankle-biting mosquitoes that everybody, I think, in Tempe has probably experienced sitting out on their porches. In addition to really making it difficult to enjoy our porches in the summer and fall, they're actually quite dangerous mosquito. They can spread a number of diseases, including, you've all heard about Zika. That's actually kind of died back. We don't really know why. The other disease that is actually really pretty scary that they transmit is dengue fever. And this is a virus that is gives you sort of, if you're lucky, kind of a horrible flu-like symptoms, but it can actually be a hemorrhagic fever and has about a 1% lethality rate, and there's currently no vaccine. It's expanding pretty rapidly around the world and is currently in Mexico, and it's certainly going to be in Tempe in the coming years. So this mosquito is a tropical mosquito originally from Africa, specialized to feed on humans, and has basically been spreading throughout Asia, first through Latin America or South America, Central America, and is coming up into the US. The next slide, please. So the people, I know that the city of Tempe doesn't work, I don't think, very much on mosquito control. Maricopa County has a vector control unit, and they do have, here's some data from them showing the numbers of Aedes aegypti, and you can see that the numbers have increased really dramatically over the last decade. And in fact, they're really the most common mosquito that we have now. This mosquito, being a tropical mosquito, is completely suppressed in winter. It really is just starting to be around now, and the numbers kind of explode in late summer and in fall. Next slide. So, as I said, Maricopa County Vector Control is really charged with doing this. They do a really great job of catching and counting mosquitoes, seeing what types there are, and testing them for disease presence. So that's where the data that you'll see on, so how much West Nile there is and things like that. They do a really great job of that and are well set up for it. In terms of control, they are also who comes and sprays neighborhoods in response to citizen complaints. But the trouble is that the spraying is really ineffective for this mosquito. And there's a number of reasons for that. The mosquitoes don't fly very much. They tend to only go a short distance from where they breed. They tend to remain under cover, kind of hiding under leaves in your backyard. And then even if they do get killed by the sprays, and of course those spray trucks are really just going down the main streets and kind of spraying up into the air. Even if they do happen to get some mosquitoes, those mosquitoes are kind of emerging constantly out of the water. And actually a big thing that isn't talked about, it's my feeling, even though there's been no studies of this, that these sprays are really knocking back the night flying moths that we used to have lots of in Tempe. And those are undoubtedly reducing the number of bats that we've got out there that could also be controlling mosquitoes. Next slide. So the interesting thing about Aedes aegypti is they have some traits that could enable low-cost pesticide-independent control in Arizona. So first of all, first point is that this mosquito can't live in the desert regions of Arizona. That can't handle the desert. So unlike, Florida, where this mosquito is invading, in Florida they can live everywhere, and the truth is there's limited possibilities for controlling of them. But these mosquitoes are only living where humans live, and the reason is that the larvae require 1 full week at least of standing water in order to develop. So what this means is if we can eliminate standing water sources, we can eliminate this mosquito. And lots of people think that, oh, it's just coming from people flood irrigating their yards or the parks and things like that. But that water, if it's done correctly, is sinking into the ground within 2 days, and that's not going to produce any of these mosquitoes. The other interesting thing about this mosquito is it really only flies a few hundred feet from where they breed. So if you find a location where there's a bunch of them, somewhere there is a water source where they're breeding. And so what I would suggest is that there are city and utility controlled habitats where really just talking to the maintenance people could really do a lot. We, going around, have found in the parks places where water is pooling from irrigation or maybe from feeding, in the Salt River Basin or in the, maybe around some of the city lakes. You can get water standing for more than a week, and then you're definitely going to get mosquitoes here in the summer. We also have a lot of subterranean flood control and irrigation infrastructure. And if those allow water to pool and sit for a week, we're going to get mosquitoes coming out of there. So like a first step is really just training the city workers. And I think we could do a decent job of reducing mosquito numbers just by them knowing about this. Then there's the privately controlled habitats, green pools, swamp coolers dripping, forming, basins that the mosquitoes could be in. People might have sprayers that are filling buckets that are sitting full of water for more than a week, flower pots. Maybe they've got garden water features. So those are things a little harder, but I really think an education initiative and outreach initiatives could really do a lot if people knew about this and people realized first of all, just how they could regain their porches, and second of all, just long-term danger of the viruses that are going to be coming here. So anyway, that's really my suggestion for the city of Tempe.
Thank you, Dr. Harrison. Very, very impressive presentation. And I like the idea about working with our city workers to educate them about what to look for and things. And we can reach out to our city manager and ask for help on that with our city workers. And would you be willing to help us with that?
Of course.
Okay, great. Councilmember QB, you look like you have something to ask.
Always, sure, thank you. So, Councilmember Adams, I know you've probably had this experience of knocking on the doors of our residents and discovering residents have real mosquito problems. And they say they don't have any standing water. In one case, it was a woman that lived by George's Ditch, which is in North Tempe, and so I'm sure that's probably the cause. And there's another area, Benedict Park, where there are dry wells. The city has dry wells, so it's the infrastructure you're talking about. And there'd be enormous problems in the parks. And I know that we have, we use larvicide for the dry wells.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, is there a more natural, organic way to rid the mosquitoes? I have an idea too, but I just want to hear about what your suggestion might be for the dry wells in particular.
I mean, there are these, so there's the larvicides, which can either be chemical or, there's some that are what they call them BT toxin. They're natural chemicals, but used in that way. There's, mosquito fish. If it's a case where the water is staying there for a long time, anybody with garden features or, like the canals and things like that, mosquito fish are extremely effective. The other thing is just I mean, I would think in general, engineering them to drain would be the best solution if that's possible.
Yeah, I think it's built into our CIP. It's pretty expensive though. I'm thinking, well, could we call up Craig? Is Craig on the line? Could he speak about the drywall issue in particular?
Craig, are you there?
I am, council members. How are you?
Hey.
Oh, good.
How's it
All right.
Great timing, because
I like
we're
the
going to be
blue
talking about
thing there.
integrated pest management too. So this, and Dr. Harrison, good to see you. I know that we've worked together
Yeah.
on some traps over the years, so thank you so
Right.
much for your presentation. Great to see you virtually. And you're right. The first and foremost issue that we want to address is not to recur and treat items, but actually to prevent them. And that's where we have had, through our capital program over the course, I think we're on our third iteration of addressing infrastructure that exists to make sure that they're actually draining. So whether we've got bubbler boxes or dry wells within our parks, we are just finishing up our third round of park improvements where we're actually addressing that specifically. We've had 3 groups
Right.
over 3 fiscal years where we've been able to address that, so that we're still going to provide our inspections, and that is really seasonally based, but we want to make sure whether we're using a biological control or a chemical control that we actually address that proactively first. So we certainly have done that. I want to say 10 to 12 parks we've been able to address over the past 2.5 years that way, and it's been a lot more successful. Goodwin Park was one that we had some very significant issues early on, and we're able to reduce the occurrences, I would say almost at 100%, but at least at 75% just by addressing it this way.
That's awesome.
So I have another idea, and my brother-in-law, Adam Cubey, is an environmental artist, and he was the artist in residence for the Tres Rios project out in the west part of the valley. And he built bat habitats in the estuary there to have a natural kind of response to natural control of mosquito populations. And I've been recently informed by someone on the Neighborhood Advisory Commission, Zoe Stein, about it's called Bat B&B. And if it's Kristen or Alex, could you share that link I sent you? But they're basically bat habitats that you can put on a pole. You can put, it can be for residential use, it can be for municipal use too, but they are habitats that you don't bring the bats to them, the bats naturally will go to them and help resolve mosquito issues in a more natural way. And I'm wondering if we could think about that possible idea. There we go. If you scroll down, you'll see information. Shark Tank is on Shark Tank. It explains how it works. And they're relatively, I mean, they're pretty attractive looking, and you place them a certain distance up from your roof. I'm sorry, down from your roof or up from the base of the house. And it can really help to control mosquito populations. I'm wondering, maybe we could consider something like we used to do a little libraries program, and we have rebates on all sorts of on trees. Maybe there's some way we could offer up rebates for residents who have a problem like this, or at least educate people about them and inform them that this is an opportunity to naturally control your mosquito populations.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Did they get good bats moving into the Tres Rios houses?
I should find out from Dan Childers, who's the scientist at ASU. He leads the Central Arizona long-term ecological research project, and I could ask him. That's a good question. I'll find out.
Yeah, because I know they are really effective some places. In some places in Arizona, you do get a lot of bats. I don't see that many in Tempe, and I'm not really sure why. I mean, like I said, I kind of have this theory that we've been spraying out and killing all the moths, which, there's tons of them if you're out in the more rural part of Arizona.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Well, I guess I could do due diligence and research and see, if it's a solution that makes sense for our part of the world.
Yeah, it would.
Fascinated with it.
Yeah, it's a great idea and I'm just not sure if they would do well.
And maybe it's a little gimmick, but I'd love to know more about it.
Yeah.
The more bats, the better, right?
I agree.
Well, this is
Natural
very,
pest control.
This is very informative, and I'm glad that Craig has your information, and so Craig, feel free to reach out to Dr. Harrison for help with any of your mosquito concerns.
What do you guys think about, do you think it's worth trying, like outreach, educational projects? Because I mean, I do feel like people don't realize, how little water it takes, and how they're contributing to their own problems. But
That's true, and I could speak personally to having that problem. We had a leak in a fountain by our pool, and it took my husband, oh my gosh, like 6 months to figure it out. It was really difficult.
I know. I mean, I had a flower pot, that I'd just been, growing a philodendron in the kitchen, and I didn't pay attention to it, and all of a sudden it was full of mosquito larvae.
And then he learned that like eating bananas makes you more attractive to mosquitoes. So he just stopped eating.
Yeah.
Even banana bread, it's like, it's crazy. I think, is Nikki on the line? Nikki, could you step up to the plate? Could we think about doing messaging on mosquito prevention? Especially, probably worse in monsoon months. I assume, Dr. Harrison, that the peak months are they monsoon months? I guess it depends. You get standing water, but
It's high from July to October, November. So it goes beyond the monsoon months.
Mhm.
And like I said, I don't think it's really mostly the monsoons. I really think it's mostly our irrigation and sprinklers.
Yeah. Mhm.
Hi,
Nikki,
council members. Nikki Ripley, Communication Manager. We certainly can do this, yes. And it has been done intermittently in the past when there were concerns from residents about spraying activities and that sort of thing, or particularly bad years or something. It's easy enough for us to engage in a round of outreach through our various tools to let neighbors know how they can hold down the populations of many kinds of pests, and especially mosquitoes. So we certainly can.
It's worth a try.
Yep.
So Nikki, do we need to go back to council for approval on that, or what do you think?
I don't think so, honestly. And also, as you were all talking, I checked out a webpage that we have, tempe.gov/pests, which is kind of a hub for pests and pestilence, we sort of joke, in the city. So it's got information and resources about roof rats and mosquitoes and things, and
Right.
links out to different things. But in truth, that area of our site could stand to be updated. So that would be a first step too, is to get that those resources on that webpage updated.
Nikki, could you run those by Dr. Harrison and see what ideas he has to add to the webpage?
100%, yes, we'd love that. Yep.
Okay.
That's a great idea. I love that.
Sorry, Councilmember QB, what were you going to say?
No, I think that's a great idea, Councilmember Adams. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, good.
All right.
Any other questions for Dr. Harrison? All right. Thank you so much for presenting today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. You bet. We'll put you to work. All right. Moving on.
Councilmember Adams, maybe we can do a video or something too.
Oh, that's a great idea. Yes, that's a great idea. Let's do that. Alex, you want to put that in your video collection for future videos?
It's something more dangerous than a wounded mosquito video.
Alex, you caught that, right?
Yes, council member. Yes.
Okay, great. Great idea. All right, so moving on to item 4B3 on the agenda, transportation demand management and mobility hubs. I believe Marilyn DeRosa, our engineering and transportation director, is here with Robert Yabas to tell us about this. Marilyn and Robert, take it away.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to give a little bit of context, Councilwoman Adams. So,
Sure.
As part of our climate action plan, we set out with 3 main action areas: resilience to extreme heat, which we just heard about, and then energy and transportation. 98% of our carbon emissions come, scope 1 and 2 carbon emissions come from energy and transportation. And so we had 4 actions in our climate action plan to work on transportation and creating a low carbon transportation system in Tempe. And the number one highlight action that the Sustainability Commission identified was transportation demand management. So as you know, we've been coming to the council committee to talk about the 4 highlight actions, and you're hearing about them in every meeting. So we recently heard about the International Green Construction Code and green infrastructure last month. Next, in August, when we meet again, we'll hear about resilient energy hubs. And this month, our climate action highlight action that we're going to be talking about is transportation demand management. So just wanted you to understand the context with which you're seeing this presentation. We're going to get to hear about the exciting work that engineering and transportation is doing, and then we can talk more about how we can support these efforts, both through policy, programs, and infrastructure to make sure we're fully utilizing transportation demand management and mobility hubs as we pursue a low carbon transportation system here in Tempe. So with that, I'll hand it over to Marilyn and Robert.
Thank you, Dr. K. Marilyn,
Thank
Robert?
you.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
thank you, Braden. Hi, I'm Marilyn Grossa. I'm the Engineering and Transportation Director, and I have with me Robert Yabez. He's our principal transportation planner. And I just want to say that none of this is my work. I am not the brains of this outfit, okay? Robert is really the brains of this outfit. And so he's been working on this, quite honestly, for his entire career. This has been one of the goals that he has had. So I'm really grateful that he's working with Meg. Meg has been a wonderful sponsor. They're working closely with us on this demand management. And so we're going to go through and just give an update for the audience. I know that you, Councilmember Tubey and Adams, you guys are aware of what transportation demand management is and what we're trying to do with our Transportation Management Association and then with mobility hubs. But we want to tie it all together so that we're not using such a foreign language, I think. With that, this will tie into several actually of your council priorities with respect to transportation, our multimodal, our 20-minute city goal, our travel time index for traffic congestion goal, as well as our greenhouse gas, as Braden mentioned. The kind of the overarching goal is the greenhouse gas emissions and our climate action plan. So transportation demand management, I recently saw a video where they talked about that transportation demand management is kind of it's a little bit clunky way to describe what it is that we're trying to do. Really, it's about providing transportation options to the community, and if we can make transportation as efficient as possible, alternate modes of transportation as efficient as possible, and we understand where people are traveling in our community, when they're traveling to those locations, and what is the reason that they're traveling. Then we can help design a transportation system that's going to best support them. So transportation demand management is really, I think, just a way of saying efficient transportation options is creating options for the community. So the transportation demand management includes strategies that infrastructure, we can change infrastructure, we can create policies and programs and partnerships. And you guys, as our policymakers in the community, are super important in guiding our infrastructure choices, in developing policies, in reaching out to partners. So you guys are really instrumental. You guys, as the policymakers, the council members for the community, in helping us achieve this demand management. And so the idea is that through those really infrastructure policies and programs, we can improve efficiency and effectiveness of the transportation system. So we're trying to shift the priority away from driving alone. And we need to do that in collaboration. The city can only do so much on its own. we need to do that in collaboration with our business community and with the community that's traveling around the city of Tempe. So we want to improve the travel options and then educate the community about what those enhanced travel options are. And this graphic, this is one that Robert has used, I think, very successfully to show that we're just trying to get from what you show on the left of this picture, which is kind of the traditional way that we've addressed transportation, is really largely through infrastructure, create roads, bigger roads, and by developing different kinds of infrastructure and then policies and programs, we can switch users to different modes so that we address a variety of quality of life issues in the community. So, whoops, click, there we go. So infrastructure is one example. I mentioned infrastructure, policies, and programs. Infrastructure is one way: public transportation, bicycle parking and support facilities, shared micro-mobility parking, and then car share parking with electric charging. You guys saw that we've done that. We just finished a project at the library with parking and electric charging. Other infrastructure is creating convenient passenger pickup and drop off. That's a new thing that a lot of transportation planners are talking about, is the curb space, the value of the curb space. So making sure people have the information that they need, the travel and the trip planning, that it's provided and it's user-friendly, comfortable waiting areas. In our case, I know that you guys both of our council members that are in this committee, one of your priorities is shade, right? Getting shade at our transit shelters. So the making the waiting areas as comfortable as possible, and then providing at the locations where the commuters, or I shouldn't say commuters, where the travelers are changing modes, providing services that would most meet their needs. So then, with respect, that was infrastructure. Then there's policies and programs. We can provide, and this is where we need really a lot of help with our business partners and employers, providing transit passes, rideshare programs, parking cash out is pretty popular. Guaranteed ride homes are important, and then policies, land use patterns. I know that that you guys are super interested in and pay close attention to our transit-oriented development, right? So particularly along the Apache corridor, along the corridors where we have easily accessible transit, creating development in those corridors that's transit-oriented, enforcement, and then there's a variety of policies that employers can engage in telework and flex schedules and whatnot. Another program that's a partnership is transportation management associations, and we're working on some best practices. We're evaluating best practices from transportation management associations around the country, and we're going to make some recommendations about how our community can create a transportation management agency or association that we think will provide the most value to our community. So there's just lots of places here, and why I'm really grateful that that Council Members Adam and QB, that you're interested in this topic, is that there's so much that you guys can do to help keep this program moving. Oops, it is extend. Here we go. So finally, with respect to transportation demand management, the impact, all of those things. What I think is interesting about this slide is that those strategies have an impact, and there's not a silver bullet, right? We can't solve our congestion with a silver bullet. There's not one solution. But if we can get each person to make a different choice, to understand what options they have and make a different choice once a week, once every 2 weeks, incrementally, it can have a huge impact. And some studies have shown, the images on the right show the percentage of reduction in congestion or traffic that can be affected using these various techniques. Just parking management, 2 to 7%, carpooling, 1 to 15%. So each of these, so the point being that each of them is incremental, but combined, they can make a tremendous impact. And then obviously what the narrative here is that it can reduce congestion, provides travel options, and ultimately safety and better air quality. So with respect to infrastructure, mobility hub is this concept that I know that Robert's been really interested in for many years, and I think he's really excited that we're actually looking at now maybe implementing some mobility hubs. At this point, I will let Robert talk about mobility hubs.
I was hoping you'd continue on your
You go ahead,
You're
Robert.
doing so well. Essentially, what is a mobility hub? A mobility hub is about combining modes of transportation locations that reduce the need for vehicle ownership and reduce single occupancy driving trips. So instead of just, a transit center, which just cater to the bus, this one would include other things like, well, the popular ones that we have now are the scooters and bikes, rental bikes. So this is just a concept that puts them all in one place. Next slide, please. This is not a typical mobility hub. This is the model that San Diego does. You got to remember that San Diego, on the city of San Diego, or Sandag, actually, the whole county is building their transportation system based on a mobility hub system. So this is what they think it is. But you got to remember, San Diego has just collected taxes, and they're spending about 1.5 billion on all the regional centers, mobility hub centers that they're proposing. We can't do that in Tempe. We don't have 1.5 billion. But the concept is not unique. It's citing all these all these vehicles in one place so that you can transfer seamlessly from one place in getting to work or in getting from home to a major travel center. What is important to know here is that this is a conceptual design of what it could be if you put them in one single place, but a mobility hub could be as small as just 2 scooters and 2 bicycles. That could be considered, that could help you commute from your house to a transit center. Next slide, please. There are about 5 mobility hub contexts that we can look at. Gateways to major destinations, just like, providing one in the downtown area where we could centralize some of these potential travel modes. There's also the transit center, like we have now in the Tempe Transit Center. It also includes, the old transit center also included zip cars on the side, but they went away because nobody was using them. But the point is, we could redevelop these and make them, did I do that? Make them work again. There are neighborhood parks that we can look at. There's about, for each one, there's space within 1 mile each in the city. So these are good locations where we could put mobility hubs. That's park and ride facilities. We have some that are larger, and we could make them bigger. Curbside locations, just like the ones you can see here on the bottom, and private developments. In fact, right now, Cul-de-sac is asking us to help them develop the first private development mobility hub in the city. Next, please. I'm not going to go through these, but these are things that we would look at when we look at locating mobility hubs: households below poverty, vehicles per household, racial minority. Next slide, please. Employment density, where are they going? Employment within 30-minute walk. Actually, we should put 20-minute walk because we are a 20-minute city. But also employment within 60 minutes of transit trips. Next slide, please. Transit boardings is important. How can we support them to continue growing? Grid bike share. I'm writing a new RFP to replace the grid bike share system that we lost. And these are the reports of these scooter shared trips that are happening in the city. Next slide, please. There you go.
Yeah, so where we're at with the transportation demand management study is that we're looking at best practices from other communities with respect to their ordinances and what kind of transportation management associations they're engaged with. And we have a survey out for the community, and we've got I believe we got most of the results, but there's still an opportunity for people to provide responses to the community survey. The next steps is to take all of the info that we've collected, the kind of the survey info and our best practice review to create some key performance indicators to support community goals. One of the things, as you know, is that we work with community development on traffic impact studies for new development. And what does our policy look like now based on the research that we're doing in this study? And how might we change that strategy, our TDM strategy for new development? And then we will be doing in August some employer and stakeholder interviews. With respect to the mobility hub, we're looking at the kind of data that Robert showed you, a survey of the community regarding what kind of amenities they might be interested in, and then amenities based on how people are currently using the system and the demographic data, so the data Robert's collecting and other best practices. We're doing public and stakeholder engagement, and what Braden's helped quite a bit with is outreach under the umbrella of the Climate Action Plan, and we're reaching out to the youth, and it's interesting. The responses that the young community provide us are quite different than the responses for future transportation needs than the older population provide us. So we're looking at the assessment of the siting criteria for the different transit, for the different the mobility hubs, socioeconomic characteristics, accessibility, employment. Robert showed you that. And then the next step is to identify some candidate sites and do some conceptual designs for the 5 mobility hub sites in the city. And those won't necessarily all be on city property, as Robert mentioned. There are some private partners that are interested in maybe really good locations for mobility hubs. The survey, what we wanted to ask you today is if you have, if there's anyone listening in the call on this in this meeting who hasn't already completed the online survey about mobility hubs, there's 2 links. You can go to tempe.gov/TDM or /mobility hubs, and there's a survey that we would love to for you to fill out. And then we'll be meeting with employers and stakeholders in August, and we have a pretty robust list that includes members of various commissions, employers, agencies. It includes, I just put here a partial list. It includes ASU, Silicon Valley Bank, State Farm, members of our Development Review Commission, Chamber of Commerce. But if there are individuals or organizations that you council members think that it would be really valuable for us to get input from, we would love that, to add them to our stakeholder surveys. So With
Yes.
that, I think, I'm sure there's something Robert forgot to say because he knows so much. But with that, I'll turn it back over to thank you so much for listening to us. And I'll turn it back over to the chair, Councilmember Adams.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Excellent presentation. Councilmember Cubey, do you have any questions?
Sure, and you had asked for suggestions, Marilyn, about other stakeholders. I think Local First is a really important stakeholder. They're another business advocacy organization. Chamber of Commerce is one, but Local First represents a lot of businesses in Tempe. Can be mom and pop, but they can be very much impacted by traffic issues, and they can be very much interested in traffic demand management as well. And I think Thomas Barr and Kimber Landing are such good partners that I would really like to see Local First consulted with as well. And then,
absolutely, thank you.
and then I wonder, like with the comparison cities, you have Cambridge, which is like 120,000 in population. And then there's Santa Monica, 92,000 population. And then you go to Seattle, which is million, the other cities are Denver, millions of residents. Do you have a kind of a town and gown, a university-based city that you're looking at that's roughly a population that has an increase in daytime population, like one that have a more direct comparison to us?
Councilmember Cubey, that's a really good question, and we had that conversation. And Robert, do you want to answer that? We had this kind of a limited list, and there were the criteria. There was a lot of mismatches. Robert, do you have some?
Yeah.
Do you want to say something about that?
Yes, I can. The issue for us is not doing a one-to-one comparison between population. It's what we are interested in looking at is what good programs does each city have that we could copy. That's why we picked some of these places. Santa Monica is really progressive, and they have a lot of TDM programs that we could benefit from. Cambridge is it's a university town as well. They have Harvard,
Right.
MIT. Then there are San Francisco is one of the. If you read any of the materials on TDM and TMA, San Francisco comes out ranking like the best one that's ever been done.
Okay, no, that's fair. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
I see your point. And I know sometimes we think about traffic demand management, we think about just North Tempe and the larger developments. And I know there was a debate about whether the Traffic Management Association should be composed mostly of larger businesses or just some businesses. Like, are we citywide, every business have that opportunity? And sometimes
the way we should look at it is the membership can be any place in the city, and they could abide with whatever services that the TMA is providing to the rest of the membership. They can do that. I mean, I would like to have the South Tempe area, like where ASU Research Park is and Discovery. They have a lot of employees as well that could benefit from this.
Right.
But we need, and there are some on the, what is it called, the Elliott corridor now that have a lot of businesses there, and there's some residential areas that are also coming up there. One of the good things now that happened is that the Platinum Pass, which is only was provided for businesses, can be abided by residential areas now. That's a good thing. That's a good program that we can help people get into.
Okay, and then with mobility hubs, I know that we have Prop 400 that's coming to the end of its tenure, right? Mm-hmm. And Prop 500 will replace it. It's going to go before the voters in 2022, is it? Or
yes, probably as close as 2022. That's
right.
The way
you want to get a couple bites of the apple. And I wonder, have the idea of mobility hubs been introduced to that Prop 500 discussion?
So, Robert,
Yes.
Before Robert answers that, I want to say that Robert has been instrumental. He's been very helpful in working with MAG in getting funding into the transportation demand management line items, set aside, if you will, in those MAG funds. So go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. The point for them is there's nobody who was leading this effort before.
Mm-hmm.
So now Tempe is leading this effort again, and we could demonstrate to the rest of the region that everything could be. The TDM is the most helpful thing and the cheapest way to reduce congestion in the region. And that's what we're after. And so the region right now, MAG, has set aside a large amount of money for TDMs.
Well, thanks. And every year during our retreat, we have a discussion about development agreements and what elements we should assist developers, especially if there is a development agreement, if there's any entitlements being given, what elements they need to include. And I think we should need to talk about developers and their role in mobility hubs. Some may be willing, like cul-de-sac, others might need a little incentivizing or even a little pushing, but that's a potential area. And then, with the American Jobs Plan, I know it's not passed yet, and in some ways it's not looking good, or maybe some version of it will pass. But I think there may be funding potentials coming up, and I wonder if we've reached out to our Congressman, Greg Stanton, to see about potential for getting funding from U.S. Department of Transportation or any other funds that might come up that might enable us to really expand on our mobility hub and really kind of take it from ideas to reality.
Well, we are taking it from ideas to reality. I can guarantee that.
Well, you're so good at getting funds. I know.
Yeah, we'll figure out how to get it funded, but that's why we're talking to developers. Is what is it that we can help you, so that your responsibilities with the tree reduction program for the Maricopa County. How can we help you achieve those?
Mm-hmm.
So that we can help ourselves. So that's why we're talking to them. They're really listening to us, and they're telling us what they need. And we keep doing just to make sure we will have a second dialogue with them again, to make sure that we heard what they were saying and we know what we can help them with.
And Councilmember Cubey, I would say that mostly when the Marge and the federal legislators reach out to us, what we offer is the capital cost, right? We say, there's projects that could be built that would be super wonderful for our transportation system, and we have not offered mobility hubs. We've offered projects really that are more fully formed, but that's a good suggestion for us to think about when we reach out to our lobbyists for federal funding, that we add this to the kind of the menu of items that we typically feed to our representatives in Washington. I don't know if Braden has anything he'd want to add.
Marilyn, that's a great point. And I think that you're right that mobility hubs is early on in that, but there could be some potential different funding lines out of Department of Transportation, whether they're planning grants or other opportunities. It probably does make sense to circle up with Marge and our federal lobbyists to make them aware that this is another space that we're looking for funds for in the future. And there might be an opportunity also to figure out different ways to be in dialogue with the Department of Transportation.
Because we know Arizona is a donor state, right? We give out more in taxes than we get back. So we always have to push that. And I know that Robert Yabas is an amazing grant applier. That's the odd way of putting it. But have you ever added up all the millions of dollars you brought to the city with your grants? I know it's not just you, but Robert, you have been at the center of a lot of those grants.
Yeah.
Have you ever added it?
Over 100 million, maybe.
Woohoo!
Wow.
I say he gets a bonus.
Maybe 120 million, 150, somewhere around.
That's amazing.
That's
The last thing,
incredible.
I'm so sorry to take so much time. I know where everybody wants to get home to their families. They're probably sitting with their families right now in their pajamas, but no, really. But it's about shaded bus stops. And we had talked at a council meeting about whether we could have a naming program for businesses where they could name the bus stop or transit stop and in return help contribute to developing that shaded transit stop. We are moving really slowly in getting our transit stops shaded.
Yeah, I guess I could respond to that. We're we have a CIP line item for shading the stops, and it's you could describe it as, I mean, we're working through them. It's prioritized against other projects, right? So I'm kind of excited about this study that they're going to finish, that Bonnie is going to finish up here with ASU, with the different kind of materials, the materials for the new shelters, and I think it'll be easier for us to implement a shaded, not just with tree canopy. I'm thinking about the shelters, but with the shelters, once we have this like kit of parts, we'll be able to, we're developing, as you know, different sizes, small, medium, and large, and northwest corner, east-west corner, right? The whole, so that we can mix and match. We can have parts and then go build them at the locations where we have the right-of-way we need. With respect to the shading of the shelters with vegetation, with tree canopy, I'd have to have Eric respond with respect to what the timing, you know, how fast that's moving or not moving. We are moving forward, and I think that we will have. I think we'll have an update for you relatively soon, and I will, we'll look at our funding for that, Councilmember Cubey, and how it's prioritized against other projects, and see if we can't move it along faster.
Well,
and it's a super.
Just let's wrap this up pretty quickly because we have another item. Go ahead,
yeah, not for now then, but I just really want to find out what if we looked at the naming program, so businesses could contribute and help build a shelter, and then they can name the shelter, you know, the Fry's shelter, whatever. And then I just want to know, maybe a Friday packet, how much it would take to shade every stop, and what our rate of implementation is, like what kind of progress are we making against our goals. But I'm sorry, I don't mean to take so much time, but if we can find that out in a Friday packet or rule of 7 request, maybe.
Yes, I agree. I agree with you, Councilmember Cubey. We've been talking about the shade structure since I was elected. I know that. So it has been a good 3 years. So we do need to get some movement on that.
Yeah, I'll get you guys. I will get a Friday packet item. That's a good idea. And Councilmember Cubey, Eric is working on a program for sponsorship, right, for shelters, and he's going to bring that back to you guys.
Great.
Oh, good.
Thank
Also,
you.
are you working with Tempe Downtown Authority for the hubs, the mobility hubs?
Yes, they
Okay,
are.
just seamless.
They're actually part of the steering committee.
Okay, good. Okay, good. I just didn't see them on the list, so I just wanted to make sure. And Robert, you're awesome, and it's good to hear your voice. Thanks, Marilyn. I really appreciate it. So we're going to go ahead and go on to item 4B4, integrated pest management, something I know the city has been working on for a while. So Craig Hayton, our deputy director for parks, is going to tell us where we are with this project. Craig?
Great. Thanks, council members Adams and Cubey. Thank you so much for having me. I know we've had a couple conversations at the work study level over the past 5 years, and this is something that we are very thankful to bring to this committee to really talk through not just an update in integrated pest management, talk through glyphosate, and then certainly have a discussion related to that. So next step, please. So I'll provide a brief overview. If we could go back one, please. I'll provide an overview of integrated pest management, very similar to the previous conversation. Just want to provide some overview of what it is very quickly, talk through some high-level updates, and then we'll spend the majority of our time talking about glyphosate, one specific herbicide, which is part of the larger integrated pest management program and process within the city. So next slide, please. All right, so integrated pest management, we'll call IPM moving forward, is really a decision-making process. As the chart on the right-hand side identifies, we have multiple different ways to identify and to address pests once they become something that we need to address. So we have cultural practices, which are those things that we do every day: cleanliness, mowing tasks, just really going and making sure that we can be as proactive as possible. We have physical means for removing pests. We also have biological means, as Dr. Harrison mentioned, with fish, with some of the mosquitoes. But then we also have chemical means, pesticides. We'll be speaking to herbicides, which is a form of pesticide that are meant to deal with weeds specifically. So we have a holistic approach. We have all these different tools in our toolbox that we've identified on the right, and we try to balance out safety, environmental concerns, and then also financial concerns, and really hold those three in balance when we have to address pests. And then our goal ultimately is not to rely upon chemicals, but also to reduce them, understanding that for the past 20 years, we certainly have had that as an approach, and we want to make sure that we're addressing opportunities for us to reduce not just pesticide use, but also synthetic pesticides as well. So that is a quick overview. Next, from an update perspective, I have 3 key updates to provide. First, we have updated our Integrated Pest Management Program document. This is something that I am really a spokesperson. I'm by default the IPM coordinator for the city, but I represent a larger team, including Dr. K, our risk management team, our water utility, engineering and transportation, parks and recreation, certainly, and then some other folks outside of the city that are part of our committee that we work through that as staff. But we have updated the document, provided updated language, but also included a pesticide selection best management practice. We have also, not this fiscal year, but the last fiscal year, went through an herbicide-free parks pilot where we had an opportunity in 4 different neighborhood parks within the city to not utilize any herbicides. And we had some great lessons learned from that, as well as we had some nice data to go along with something that's out there in the industry for mechanical removal of weeds in granite areas. We also were able to really compare the difference between chemical weed removal and manual weed removal within turf, around trees and sidewalk edges and those sorts of things. And then some of the unfortunate realities that we found, the bottom left picture on the slide, that we recognize that with and without some tree guards, mechanical weed removal provided some challenges to something that we absolutely do not want to see within our area, which we're really concerned with providing adequate shade. And to do that, we need to make sure that we're caring for our trees. So we have then transitioned to establishing tree rings within our parks and recreation areas. You can see from the bottom left, the second picture over. And then final update, we have an organic land management grant, thanks to Councilmember Cubey submitting for that. If we could go back 1 slide, please. The bottom right picture identifies Tempe Sports Complex Field Number 1, and the picture to the left of that, which is Dwight Park. We're working with Beyond Pesticides and Osborne Organics on a multi-year process to convert those areas over to an organic land management approach, which really focuses on those cultural practices, looking at fertilization, aerification, and those sorts of things, so that we have to be less reactive, but be more proactive in managing pests. All right, next slide, please. So a quick overview on glyphosate, on where we're headed. We're going to try to answer 4 key questions. What is glyphosate? How is it utilized? Where is it utilized? And then how often is it used as well? We'll talk through some alternative herbicides that we have researched and we're piloting, and then talk through some options and impacts. And on the right-hand side, I've just identified, because glyphosate is an active ingredient, it is in more than 700 different formulations. But I've just identified here 6, just so we recognize what we're talking about here is not a specific product like Roundup. That is something that does have glyphosate in it, but it can be found in so many more different types of herbicides. But glyphosate is the typical active ingredient, as I mentioned, in more than 700 different herbicides on the market. Next slide, please. So what is glyphosate? From an herbicide perspective, it is synthetic. It is not an organic product. It is systemic, which means that if you spray a leafy portion of the plant, it will translocate, it'll take the herbicide down into the roots and actually affect the entire plant. And it is something which is compared to a contact herbicide that only kills the areas that it hits on a plant. And then it is a broad spectrum herbicide, meaning that it covers a wide variety of weeds. It addresses grassy weeds and also some broadleaf weeds as well. So that is what it is in a nutshell from an herbicide perspective. And then how has it historically been utilized within the city? We're going to talk through some of the areas that it's utilized on the next slide, but it's typically been used in 4 different ways: to establish tree rings and turf, as you can see from the top left picture, spot spraying weeds and decomposed granite areas. On the top right, we have what's called a cut stump, and that is somewhere where if we cannot remove a stump mechanically, we can then paint on an herbicide like glyphosate to keep it from resprouting. And then finally, we have turf conversions, the bottom right slides, where we have a grass area that is converted over to decomposed granite. And I've crossed out cut stump and turf conversion because over the past year and a half, we have actually restricted use of glyphosate away from cut stump and turf conversions. We have found that there are some amenable products that we can use in light of glyphosate. So we now are only utilizing it in 2 out of the 4 areas that we've historically been using. So we have restricted use of glyphosate over the past couple of years just to tree rings and turf and spot spraying and decomposed granite areas. Now, this is just where they're used. They're not exclusively used, but they're used in cooperation with mechanical removal most specifically. All right, the next slide, please. Where is it utilized within the city? We utilize glyphosate and herbicides within parks, facility, and right-of-way landscapes. And we recognize in the pictures on the right, we know that each of these areas have a mixed amount of high, medium, and low contact potential. We expect that people will be in parks. We don't expect that people will be walking through decomposed granite areas in some of our right-of-way landscapes. So that, I think, is an important element for us. And then from a timing perspective, I've identified just parks specifically, and the stat on we use it up to 14 times per year is a little bit misleading, only because we have separated tree rings, the establishment of tree rings, and spot spraying into 2 different tasks. As we would be in a park to establish tree rings about a half dozen times a year, we would also be spot spraying in the decomposed granite area. So in the bottom right picture, you can see Peterson Park, newly renovated Peterson. If we're establishing the tree rings, we will also, while we are there, address potentially the weeds if we want to remove them and address them chemically at the same time. So the 14, 6 of those are in combination, and then the 2 additional for spot spraying may be during the winter months where we may not have to establish any tree rings. So that's just how it's utilized within the park areas. So we have spent some time as a group working through some alternative herbicides. And I'll spend a little bit of time breaking down this table. If we just look on the left-hand side and the separations by the red lines, horizontal lines, we have glyphosate on the top. We have an equivalent product. Is there something that is exactly like glyphosate, but not glyphosate and doesn't include glyphosate? The next level down would be a suitable alternative. We have recognized that a suitable alternative would be a combination of systemic products, something that we could put together, multiple products that may cost us more, but would still be a systemic herbicide that would allow us, when we want to address weeds chemically, would allow us to still make a single application to address a weed. And then when we go down to that bottom 2 options, we look at what we're calling less efficient alternatives. These may be a combination of product or a single product that unfortunately is going to result in more frequent visits to the site. And when we looked at these 3 different levels and categories, we found there are no equivalent products on the market that match up with glyphosate. That second list of suitable alternatives, we have found that there are suitable alternatives, but we have some concerns with mobility in the soil with one of the products that would get mixed. Therefore, we don't think, especially working with our urban forester, Richard Adkins, that that's really a good method for us to move forward. So now we're looking at the less efficient alternatives. One of them has the same concerns. We have the same concerns with the top one, but then moving down to the second alternative and less efficient, there is a contact herbicide, a single product that really is broad spectrum, but we believe it's going to require twice as many visits. So we're actually piloting that project now or that product throughout the summer to try to identify if the labor is really twice as much, because we know that if we're going to find an alternative to glyphosate, we want to make sure that it's effective. And we also want to make sure that we can plan and allocate staff accordingly, and understanding if there's additional labor costs, we want to make sure that we are adjusting our budgets accordingly. So those are just 3 different levels of some alternatives that we have looked at. Next slide, please. So our options really are threefold. One, our current practice is to work through piloting different herbicides in place of while we're also utilizing glyphosate, we, as I mentioned, have restricted the use in 2 of the 4 areas. There could be a larger restriction on glyphosate within the city, or there could be a complete ban on it for our purposes as well. So those really are our 3 options for us to consider. And then ultimately, the most restrictive of those would be the ban, and we just need to take into consideration any budgetary impacts. In speaking with a right-of-way landscape team, just under $200,000 is what we think the increase in the contract amount would be if we were to transition away from glyphosate. And then, as I mentioned, we are piloting different approaches within park and facility landscapes. We think that could result in potentially 3 to 4 FTEs. And I've added an additional chart at the bottom that looks at glyphosate and diquat, the 2 different products that we're looking at utilizing and comparing against each other and making applications during different months of the year. We anticipate that the diquat in green is going to result in 28 different visits or 28 applications, again, splitting up spot spraying from tree rings. Some of those will be combination, where glyphosate is something that we're making 14 separate applications. And again, many of those are happening, as you can see, from March through November at the same time while we're on site. So that is a quick update on glyphosate, how it's utilized. Would be happy to answer any questions. Would happy to have a discussion about it, but really do appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion. And as I mentioned, I'm a voice for a larger team that is working through this, and would be happy to take any questions at this point.
Great presentation, Craig. Really appreciate it. It's quite interesting to see the different options and notice all the things you've been trying. So keep up the good work. Councilmember Cubey, do you have any questions?
Yeah, and I'll try and be quick. And thank you so much, Craig. I know you've been working on this a long time, and we're seeing such progress, and I appreciate it. So when we look at this issue, we look across the country. We know that, parks are the biggest concern, right? Where children play, where dogs walk. And I know that the World Health Organization deemed glyphosate to be a probable carcinogen. And then for pets, they said it's a known carcinogen. And Tufts just finished a 6-year study and saw a 70% increase in the risk of lymphoma, and they directly related to glyphosate in this scientific peer-reviewed study. And then there's another study that said 93% of humans have glyphosate in their urine, and children have the highest levels, way higher than adults. And then dogs are 30% higher. Their levels are 30% higher than humans. They go to a park, they tend to stick their noses and their snouts in foliage or on the ground, and so they're likely to absorb it. So we know that this is a problem. We know that we know also the EPA had some big corporate interests that were trying to deny the problem, and we're starting to hear more and more about it and more talk about federal legislation. And there's also been there's been a lot of legal judgments, jury judgments that have been very damaging to I forget, is it Bayer, something that owns glyphosate? In any case,
I believe
my is parks. My major concern is parks. And also, especially, I'm concerned with Benedict, or with the sports complex. I know there's a dog park there. Do we use glyphosate in our dog parks in Tempe?
No, and I really appreciate that. And that was something I didn't mention within our integrated pest management document, is that we've identified, even within, we've talked very broadly today, but we've identified areas where that we'll call restricted zones, playgrounds, dog parks, where we say if we have to use an herbicide period or a pesticide, we will post so that people know, right? So those are things we don't do. We'll either lock it down for a period of time, or we will post to let folks know. Sports fields, same way. So we haven't, to my knowledge, over at the Tempe Sports Complex, we had an invasive weed stink net that we found over there this year in some of the decomposed granite. We had, myself, Robert Bartley, had a long conversation about our alternatives, and we decided mechanically to remove it. It was much easier for us to do it that way than potentially where we have pets or kids walking around, to address it that way. So we have restricted it within those areas specifically, and a few others. And I can't think of times that we have utilized it in the last 16, 18 months off the top of my head, but I'm not into the level of that. So we recognize that there are times where we have to use pesticides generally in some of those areas, but we also recognize that our hope is to do so and to give people the information if we have to keep it open. If not, can we close it down to do something like that?
No, I see that. And some people just don't notice, you know, they're not going to be looking at the signs. That's my concern. And we're covering ourselves perhaps, but I just concerned about any application where kids play, dogs play. And I know other cities have made this conversion. And in fact, Tempe had an informal rule with no glyphosate under Ron Pies, who led our park system for so many years. So I wonder if we can, I understand too that there's going to be an added cost. I get that, but I think the benefits are a healthier community, healthier workers, because people who have to spray it, it's not so good for their health. And, healthier animals. We see lymphoma cases just on the rise, and with a lot of academic work showing that there could be an application of glyphosate that relates to that. So I would hope that we can look at how we called other cities to say, when you converted, I think, was it San Jose that stopped glyphosate? I know there's other cities in California. When you converted and said no glyphosate, what were your added costs per resident? So we can have an idea. And then still going into that, I say our healthy communities sometimes cost more, but in the end, the external benefits are, longer lives, healthier community, healthier animals, and it's well worth the cost.
Yeah.
Cities and what their costs were and how they account for that, the benefits, the public benefits.
We can certainly research the additional costs, and that's part of the reason why we're piloting utilizing other products, so that we can know in our environment what is potentially going to cost us. We know that the establishment of tree rings, working with Richard Adkins, is something that has an additional benefit. It is something that we want to be very careful of for the safety of the trees, but balancing that out with people where, and the organic herbicide comparison as well with that as well. We know that establishing tree rings mechanically is pretty difficult. Where we want to do so chemically, where we want to balance out the opportunities through the organic land management grant, also to see what opportunities are there where, when we do need to address things chemically, are there organic alternatives that may not, that are still herbicides and intended to address things. So ultimately this does, once we have our information, it does come down to, with the right-of-way transportation maintenance, it's an additional cost that if it's not allocated for in the budget, it just comes at the expense of something else. And that's the balance that we just have to make. And for my team specifically within parks, if we have to double our labor to not utilize a product, then we either have to be okay with those costs being absorbed somewhere else, or we have to get the additional funds to do so. Maybe that's a good conversation as we head into the next budget cycle of, at the end of this, heading into the end of this calendar year before we start the budget cycle, can we have those conversations and identify what those costs are, at the council level, whether we come back at the committee here at the end of summer and report back, or we potentially have a work study conversation about it as well. So we're happy, to take this conversation beyond. This is a report back on a very specific item, but we recognize from the policy level that this is, certainly has budgetary impacts, and we certainly would love to have that conversation.
Thank you,
Craig. And I know that the park staffing was cut badly and has never been reestablished all the way. So I think that's a really good conversation to have. If we're saving lives and because we're using less hazardous chemicals, then that's an easy choice for me. We get more staffing that use safer chemicals, and our dogs and cats and children don't get all of this in their system. So I would really like to have that conversation and follow up with it, looking into our next budget year. With that, first of all, thank you so much for your presentation. With that,
thank you.
I want to thank all of our presenters today for such great information. It was really, really informative. We'll now move on to item 4C, announcements. Councilmember Cubie, do you have anything?
I'll make it really quick because we have 1 minute. Yes, I hear the ASU is converting lawns in Poly campus. It's sort of a pilot to clover lawns because they use far less water. And so I would like to look at a pilot for our city, investigate that possibility, bring that to council, and a recommendation to residents because we know we're in a water shortage. we should maybe look at other options. And clover lawns are beautiful. They don't grow as tall. They don't need as much maintenance, and they use far less water. And so I'd love to have staff come back with that possibility, you know, with the potential for that for both the city, landscaping, and for residents.
Absolutely. And I completely concur. And that was, I was thinking about the same kind of announcement. So you covered it. I really appreciate it, because I'm quite excited about this clover idea. And I mean, we could convert, we convert at the city and then have, residents learn how to convert and really make this Tempe Clover City in the future. So I'm super excited about it. So I would agree with you, Councilmember Cubey, on that. So let's move forward with a pilot program perhaps on it. And Craig, if you want to give details.
We need to get a presentation first, though, because we'd have to get council approval.
Oh, okay. So let's do that next then. Put it on the agenda.
Okay, great.
Make it an agenda item.
Sure, and I can help connect people to the ASU contacts if they need them. Staff.
Okay, that'd be great. And I don't have any other announcements. So I want to let everyone know that we will be taking off the month of July. And our next meeting date will be Wednesday, August 25th at 4 p.m. I really want to thank all the presenters and all the participants and all the staff on this call. Y'all did a great job, and enjoy the month of July off. Take care. Have a great night.
Thank you, Chair Adams. Great job.
Thank you.